Before we start this video, a large thank you to MK, Seth, Frederico, Braden, Bai, Swizz, Jacob, Robert, Bread, Loic, Freakin, and Kidani for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And a large thank you to Slim Shaggy for their immense support to the channel on Patreon. I appreciate you very much, my friend. Hello guys, and today we have another request. We're going to make an elevator in this game. So let's start by creating a cube, unless you already have an elevator model, in which case you go ahead and use that. And I'm going to make the cube the dimensions of just a platform. The platform is going to rise. Excuse me guys, I think I'm starting to lose my voice, so bear with me. I'm going to make the platform the size of about 5 by 5. I think that looks good. I'm going to make the thickness a bit thinner, so maybe 0.25. My goal is just to make it look like just a raising platform, so I'm not going to get too particular over this. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to put it part way into the ground, like so. This is just a stylized preference again. I'm going to add my little material to it, and I'm going to rename it Elevator. I'm then going to put a cube object as a child of it. I think if I can't do that because it matches its size, so delete it. Make the cube outside of the elevator game object and then drag it in as a child after it's already been created. That way it will have, or maintain rather, its size. So I'm going to drag this over to the center of the elevator, and I'm going to change just the height of it to, again, maybe 0. Oh, that's the collider, not the game object. 0.25 looks fine, and I'm going to raise it out just a little bit. So I want to put it out like that, so when we press it, it goes down. Going to apply a material to it again, and then I'm going to make it a child of the elevator object. So once that's done, I'm going to change the name of this actually first to button. We're going to add a couple things to this elevator. The first one being an animator component, because we're going to animate that button. So it's really easy to animate game objects if you're just going to do a simple movement. I'll show you how if you don't know. I'm sure a lot of you probably already know how to do this though, but I'm going to make a folder inside my animations and object folder. I'm going to call this elevator because this is an object, not like a character. So it's going to be a lot more simple. I'm going to go to the window and I'm going to hit animation and then animation. I'm going to highlight the elevator and then click create new clip. I'm going to call this first one elevator underscore button underscore press underscore 01. So what you want to do is hit this record button, and then you'll be able to basically move this. So move the button just a little bit, then move it right back, just so you have a keyframe here. And then move your keyframe tracker, whatever you want to call this thing, right to the end of the animation clip, and then place the button all the way down as far as you want it to go when you press it. And then what you want to do is Control-C this keyframe at the end, because we're going to use this on a new animation. I don't think you can right-click and copy it. No, I don't think you can. No. Okay, so just Control-C it. And then what you want to do is go over to the button press and create new clip. Let's call this one elevator underscore button underscore release underscore 01 or lift. And then press the record button again, and then Control-V your animation because you can't right-click paste. So Control-V that there, and then go right to the end and then do the opposite. Just bring it back to where it was originally. I think mine was on 0.69, I want to say, originally. So. And then we've done that, uncheck the record button, and now you have 2 button animations. It's just that easy. So now it should have all automatically created an animator controller for you. It did for me and named it the same name as my game object, which is elevator. Let's go in here. We want the first state to be empty. So create a new empty state, call it empty, right click it also, and set it as the default layer. We don't want any animation to play right away when we start the game. So we need one parameter. We need to know if the button is pressed or not. So let's just say is pressed. And then we're going to make a transition from the button lift to empty with no parameter required. And then from button press to button lift, we need to make a check to make sure the button is not pressed. So if the button is not pressed down, then we can go back to the lifting animation and then return to empty. I'm going to make the exit time 1 and transition duration 0 on both of these because they should line up perfectly. I shouldn't need to blend them. And I'm just going to straighten this out so it looks a bit neater, and that is good. Okay, cool. So now we go to the elevator game object and add our script. I'm going to call this elevator interactable. And the way this works, it should be just pretty universally the same no matter how your interaction system works. Oh, don't forget to add a rigid body too. And make sure you check is kinematic and you're not using gravity. We're going to move this with code. But yeah, this should work pretty much universally the same no matter how your interaction system works. So it's a bit different than how I did it in Nephilim, but it works identically with the move logic, so it should be pretty easy to implement. I'm going to erase the start and update function and put in my namespace as is per tradition. And then I'm going to start by making a few variables here, or declaring a few variables, I should say. I'm going to change this from mono behavior to interactable, although honestly it doesn't really matter because we're not actually interacting by pressing a button. We're interacting by walking over a collider. But just to keep it, I guess you could say, neat in naming conventions, this is an object that you interact with. So I'm going to make a header here for my destination. And then I'm going to put a serializable field for my vector3 destination high, and then a vector3 for my destination low. What does this mean? Well, this is the highest point the elevator will travel to. So this is where you're going to go if the elevator is on the ground. And then this next one is the lowest point the elevator will travel to. So this is where the elevator is going to travel if you are already at the highest point. So an elevator, obviously, it only goes either up or down. So this is going to be, we're going to make ours a 2-point system. Either it goes all the way up or all the way down. So then we're going to say bool is traveling is equal to false at the start. And then we're going to say bool button is released is equal to true at the start. Because when you start your game, the button has not been pressed and the elevator is not moving. So these should be initialized as such. Right below that, let's make another header for the animator options. And I'm going to make a serializable field for the animator component itself. I'm going to call this, you can call it button or elevator animator is probably a better name for me because the whole elevator has the animator component on it, not just the button. I'm going to make a string for button pressed animation or button press animation. I'm going to equal that to, what did we call it again? Copy that, elevator underscore button underscore press underscore 01. Cool. Why is that giving me grief? I forgot to put an equal sign. Okay, we're good. Now let's save that. We have to add a couple more variables here still. So I'm going to make one up top here first for interactable collider. So this is the collider that's going to be basically a trigger. It's going to exist over your button, and it's going to be the collider that you want to basically, when your player walks through it, you want to push the button down. So I'm going to call this interactable collider. If you have trouble with this, so first make an empty game object under your button and name it interactable collider. Make sure you make the Y value a little bit bigger if you find you're walking over it and it's not triggering. And if you want, you can also make the tag here interactable just for the sake of neatness. But put a box collider here if you have a button like me that's a square. But this the size here, you want to make sure that if you have a floating collider especially, the Y value is just a bit larger here. So if you find you're walking over the button and it's not triggering, just increase the size of this collider. All right, so down over here below the animator header, let's make a private on trigger enter and a private on trigger exit. And this is just going to be called when something walks through this trigger collider that we have below the button. I forgot we also actually need another variable. Serializable field is a list of character managers. So characters basically they're standing on the button. Now this game right now is single player at the moment, so there's only ever going to be one character on the elevator. But you could have monsters basically standing on the button with you when you jump on. So it's important to keep a list of what's there because we're going to have to move the character a little bit while the elevator is moving up too. I'll show you why in the future. Then let's make a private void activate elevator. And then right below that, we want to make a private I enumerator. And we want to say move elevator. And we want to give it a vector3 direction. So we'll call it the final position, not a direction, sorry. And then float duration of how long it should take. You want to keep this number like maybe 2 or 3 seconds at least. Never go any quicker than that because you might get some stuttering. You can probably do it, but I would, just to be safe, I would keep it around 2 to 3 seconds, at least in my experience. You don't want the elevator to move too fast. It also depends how long the position is, the destination position is from the current position. So private I enumerator release button. That's another coroutine we need. Pass a character manager variable. I'm going to call it character. And then we're going to make a private void add character to lists of characters standing on button. Make that require a character manager variable. And then lastly, remove character from list of characters standing on button and also make that require a character manager. Okay, this is everything we're going to need. So let's start populating the logic. First things first, on trigger enter, we want to check for a character manager variable. So if a character is not the thing that's entering this trigger collider, we don't want to do any logic. We want to make sure it's an actual character trying to move this elevator. With this logic too, you can actually have it so enemies can move the elevator if they walk on top of it, which I think is a cool little thing to keep in the game. If you want to make it player only, change this to player manager instead of character manager. Then we're going to say if character does not equal null, add character to the list. If is not traveling and button is released, then we activate our elevator. And that's it for this part of the function. Now, on trigger exit, you can pretty much copy everything here, except delete what's inside the if character does not equal null. And instead of having that logic, we are going to simply say start coroutine release button. So this is basically when you leave the trigger collider of the button, it's going to check to make sure no one's standing on it, and then it's going to release it. Okay, so activate elevator. What we have to do here is elevator animator set bool. And we got to say is pressed is equal to true. And then we have to press the button. So we play the button animation on the elevator. And we do that by saying button is released is equal to false. And then we say elevator animator dot play. And we pass our button press animation. And that is it. And why can't I play this? It's because I'm trying to play from the animation instead of the animator variable. There we go. So dot play, pass that, and that looks good. Excellent. So now, right below that, we want to say if transform dot position is equal to destination high. So if we're at the highest point the elevator can travel, well, we know we got to go low. And if we're at the lowest point, so if transform dot position equals destination low, if we're at the lowest point the elevator can travel, then we know we have to go high. So we do that by saying start coroutine, move elevator, and we pass the position low. We pass the duration. I think I could say 1. I might need to edit this off video if it's too jittery, because I don't have a large distance to travel. I'm only going up like 5 Unity units. So that'll be 5 meters across about 1 second. Maybe I'll make it 2 seconds, or just increase the duration a little bit more. We'll see. So just tweak these numbers if you find it's jittery. You don't want to move it like lightning fast because, Unity and physics, sometimes some crazy stuff will start happening. Then we say is traveling is equal to true. Down here I move elevator. And then we say if duration is greater than 0, float start time is equal to time dot time, float end time is equal to start time plus duration. Yield return null while, and then we're going to say while the time dot time is less than the end time, we want to do some logic. So all we're going to do here is we want to actually move the elevator. So we say transform dot position is equal to vector3 dot lerp between the position that we're already at and the final position over duration times time dot delta time. Now we need to save this movement to a vector3 variable because we have to apply this upward motion to the character too, because we're not parenting our character under the elevator's game object. And I'll explain why I'm choosing not to do that in a moment. So just copy this, vector3 movement velocity equals this, and then make another vector3 called character movement velocity, and just say this is equal to a new vector3 and make it 0, and then only take the y movement, so the upward movement from the movement velocity, and then make everything else 0. And then down here, we say for each character that's pressed the button, I'll make a note here. If you're playing online or you have more characters, you also want to keep a list of every character on the elevator because you can also walk into the elevator without pressing the button. So let's say you and your friend get on the elevator and he presses the button. We still have to move him like we're moving you. So if you are running multiplayer, make a list of anybody that enters and exits the elevator, not just who presses the button. Okay, so I'm going to make a comment right here. It's the exact same thing. Just make a bigger trigger collider and add people to the list as they enter. So right here, we're going to say for each character, this will be, if you're running multiplayer, it will be characters who press the button and characters who are in the elevator. So we can say right here, characters on button. This is a single player game, so I had to press it, obviously. Character controller, single player game so far. I'm going to add multiplayer though. Dot move, character movement velocity times time dot delta time. So you're moving the character on the y-axis the same amount the elevator is moving over time dot delta time, then say yield return null, and then outside of the while loop, we have to basically do a couple things just to make sure this finalizes correctly, and that is you want to make sure that the elevator's position is set to the final position by saying transform.position is equal to final position, and then you say is traveling is equal to false. So on release button, we're going to make sure we're not traveling. So we're going to say while the elevator is traveling, just wait and do nothing. So we're going to say yield return null. And then after it's stopped traveling, we're going to say yield return wait for seconds. And this is the amount of time you want to wait before the button pops back up. I'm going to say 2. And then we're going to say right below that, remove characters from list of characters standing on button character. And we're going to make sure we use the new keyword here, or else it's going to give you an error. So yield return new wait for seconds 2. And then we're going to say if characters on button.count is equal to 0, we're going to say button is released, or elevator animator dot set bool is pressed is equal to false. And then we're going to say button is released is equal to true. So if there's no one left standing on the button, release the button. Okay, add character to list of characters standing on button. If characters on button dot contains character, return. We don't want to add the same character twice if they walk in and out of the collider while it's moving. Characters on button dot add character. And then down here, remove character from list of characters standing on button. Characters on button dot remove character. And then we can do a for loop to check for nulls in the list, because when you remove it from a list, you just make the position empty, but it still kind of contains an empty position on the list. So we do that by saying int I is equal to characters on button dot count -1. If I is greater than -1, I minus, and then we just go down here and we check the list for a null position by saying if characters on button position I is equal to null, then we say characters on button dot remove at I, and that is it. Okay, let's save this. We still got to do a couple things in the inspector. And I'm just going to make a note here. This just removes any null entries in the list. That's all that does. All right, so save that, minimize the game here, drag in your, or rather get your lowest point on the elevator. I don't think we can paste that, can we? No, we can't. So for me, it's a position. The position is going to be my Z and Y. Everything else is 0. So first the Y is 0, then I move it up, and my Z, or my Y becomes 5. I'm going to change it a little bit. So 4.8 actually, and my Z is 23.5. So yeah, just get your high position and your low position. Enter the coordinates of the world down there, right there. It is world coordinates. That is important. And just paste those in there like that. Make sure you drag in your animator variable and drag in your interactable collider variable. So why am I not parenting a character under the game object? Well, if you're using netcode, you actually can't parent network objects under non-network objects. And I think if it is a network object, there's still some other things you have to do. Make sure you uncheck looping on these animations. That's very important. So yeah, you can parent the character under the game object, but as you can see, this works fine without it. My character stays on the elevator, and I'm able to just run around on top of it like so. So if the button resets, there we go, and I run down and press it again. If I run around and wait a few seconds, you'll see that the button does reset, and that is absolutely working as intended. Run back on top of it, there we go. I can run around, I can roll onto the elevator, I can move around, and I can even fight on it, and my character is sticking to it in a way without it also limiting my movement. So if you were to just parent the character under the elevator, this would work. However, you'll find that if you try to move around while the elevator is moving, you get some weird logic. So that won't work entirely. At least that's the way it is for regular rigid bodies, and I believe that is the way it is for character controllers too. If someone wants to test that and confirm they can, that'd be cool. But I chose not to parent the game object under the elevator, like I said, because eventually if you want to implement this for multiplayer, you're not allowed to do that with Unity's netcode, to my understanding. So guys, if this did help you, be sure to drop a like and leave a comment. It does genuinely help out the series so much. And if you have another request, this was a request from somebody before we started refactoring for multiplayer, now is the time to do it. If there are no more requests, I'm going to begin the multiplayer refactor. I will see you guys in the next video.